In this movie, I want to show you how to manually enter track information in case either iTunes is unable to identify a particular CD or you don't have an active internet connection at the time you import the CD tracks. I'm going to go to iTunes Preferences. If you're on Windows, you can go to Edit Preferences. And here under the General section, I'm going to uncheck Automatically Retrieve CD Track Names from Internet. Now, you don't have to do this unless you want to follow along with me with your own CD and enter some information manually. As I mentioned in the previous movie, most of the time you do want to keep this checked so iTunes will automatically be able to identify your CDs and you won't have to type this stuff in yourself. So I'll close Preferences, and I'm going to insert another audio CD into my computer. So you can see it just shows up with the generic name of Audio CD under my Devices heading, and the tracks are just listed as Track 1, Track 2, Track 3, and so on. And we do get their time durations. No other information is available from the CD itself. Now, there's nothing saying I can't import this CD right now. I have complete access to the Import CD button down here in the lower right-hand corner, and if I click it, each track will be imported as usual. But the problem is that every track will come in with these generic names. When I look in my library, I won't be able to tell who the artist is, what the album name is, what the song titles are, or any other useful information. Sure, I could manually enter the information after I import the CD, but it makes more sense to do it beforehand, because iTunes will then recognize the CD the next time you insert it, and you won't have to manually enter the information again. And you want to add at the very least the artist, album name, and song titles. Now, there are a couple of ways of doing this. We could go through item by item. For instance, I can click on track 1 to select it, pause a second, then click its name again, because if you click too quickly, iTunes will think you're double-clicking and start playing the track, and I can type the first name of the first song on the CD. And then I can come over to the artist area, click in there, and enter that info, and we'll enter the information for the album. It's called Kinky Boot Beast. If I wanted to put a genre here, I could. You don't have to. Again, I do recommend you at least do the name of the song, the artist, and the album. Then we can do the next one. This track is called Nothing. Go to the artist. And you'll notice as soon as I type the letter T, iTunes automatically suggests the artist name for me. So it's a nice feature that iTunes tries to recognize what you're meaning to type to save you some time. So if that's correct, I would press return or enter, and it just enters that for me. If it were incorrect, I would just keep typing, and iTunes would continue trying to guess what artist name I'm trying to type. Again, works the same way for the album. I just have to type the letter K, and there it is. So I could just come through here song by song and manually enter all this information, but that's a pretty slow and tedious way to type all the info for an entire CD. Another way we can do this is to select the next track, and then right-click and choose Get Info. Alternately, we could select a track and choose File, Get Info, or use the keyboard shortcut of Command-I or Control-I on Windows. Any of those methods opens this info window we're looking at here, which you can see is divided into several sections or tabs at the top. We'll be getting into each one of these areas later, but the one I'm interested in right now is info. And in here I can add the track information, as well as some additional info that doesn't have a column in the main iTunes window. So I'll type the name of the song, press tab. Again, iTunes tries to figure out what artist I mean to type in here. I can put the year now. This was 1997. And basically I can just press tab to move from field to field to enter this information. Just be careful not to press enter or return, or else iTunes will think you're done and close this window. Now you might be wondering what the difference between the artist and the album artist field is. Generally, anytime you're working with an album by a single band or artist, you only need to fill in the artist field. In cases where the album may be a compilation, like Greatest Hits of the 90s or something like that, which might include a dozen different artists, you would put the artist who performed the particular track you've selected in the artist field, and then in the album artist field, you could maybe put the name of the album itself, or possibly the producer or compiler if it's a person of note. Opinions vary on what the official use of the album artist field is for, but mostly it's there for situations where it might not be clear who the artist of the entire album is. It's also useful if you have two albums with the same name. For example, there are a ton of albums in existence called Greatest Hits. If you have more than one album with that title, it's helpful to put the artist name in both the artist field and the album artist field. It can help iTunes keep better track of the individual songs from each album, especially if you like to view your collection in cover flow view. We've also got the album field, which again is just the name of the album. If the CD is part of a collection, I could put disc number of whatever the total number of discs are. Similarly, this is track 3 of 14 tracks on this particular album. Grouping and composer are more here for classical music. If you have symphonies that need to be grouped together, you can put in the grouping information in the composer. Some people I know actually like to keep track of beats per minute for their song, basically what the tempo of the song is. You definitely don't have to do that if that's not something you're interested in. And if you have any particular comments about this one track, you can type that in here. And of course, you can pick a genre. And if this track is part of a compilation, you can check part of a compilation. So when you're done entering the info for this track, you don't have to leave this window to go to the next track. Just click Next, and you can see that takes me to track 4. So this one's called Wash Away. Artist is the Jelly Bricks. And I'll press return to close that. So it's a little bit faster than manually clicking each one of these fields in the list view here in iTunes, one by one, and then typing in the info. But since this CD contains tracks that are all from a single artist, and they're all obviously appearing on the same album, it makes sense that I should really only have to type that info in once and have it apply to all the tracks. So what I can do is select all the tracks by selecting the first track, holding down Shift, and clicking the last track to select those tracks and everything in between. Or you can press Command A or Control A on Windows to select all the tracks, which I can still do even though I've already entered information for some of the tracks. And now I can right-click anywhere on the selected tracks and choose Get Info. iTunes asks me if I'm sure I want to edit information for multiple items. I'll say yes. And now we have the multiple item information window, which looks a little bit different than the regular individual song info window. Notice there's no field for song titles because we have multiple tracks selected. Instead, we have fields that relate to the entire album as a whole. So the artist in this case is the Jelly Bricks. Year is 1997. Album again is Kinky Boot Beast. And that's all I'm going to type in there for now. And you can see that all that global information has now been added to each track. Now I just need to add song titles. At this point, it's definitely easiest to select the first untitled track, get info, add the song name, and click Next to go on to the next track. You can even use the keyboard shortcut of Command N or Control N to jump to the next track without having to take your hands off the keyboard if you prefer that. So now that I've entered all the important information to the CD, I'm finally ready to import. Again, you could add all this info to the untitled tracks after you import them, but adding it before you import ensures that this info will automatically appear the next time you insert this CD. So let's click Import CD, and now iTunes is importing each track with the proper information already included. I'll just let it do its thing, but I do want to mention again that if you're importing a popular album by a popular artist, you most likely won't have to manually enter information. But if you're importing an obscure album by an obscure artist and the album info doesn't appear even when you have iTunes set to automatically search for info, you will have to enter this information by hand. But then you can do your part so that other people with iTunes and the same album won't have to type this album's info by hand themselves. Once you've entered the album info with the CD selected, go to the Advanced menu and choose Submit CD Track Names. Now, if you haven't entered all the info, you will be asked, like I have been here, to go back and add info. Notice right now it's telling me that I must have the genre included if I want to submit this information. So I have to stop the importing of the CD and enter that information. So I'll go ahead and stop. I can do Select All, Get Info, and choose the genre. I'll just say it's pop. Click OK. Now I can continue importing the CD. Go back to Advanced, Submit CD Track Names. Now, as we saw in that message, you can't actually submit the names while the CD is importing, so I'll have to wait till this is done. So now that the CD has been finished importing, I can go back and choose Advanced, Submit CD Track Names. If I have any other information that I wanted to enter, I have the opportunity to do so here in this dialog box. And when I'm done, I can click OK, and iTunes will connect to the CDDB or CD database online and upload the information you've entered. And the CDDB actually has a staff of people who are constantly checking and fixing song information that users send them over the internet. But now when some other iTunes user inserts their copy of the CD that you just added the information for into their computer, the information they receive from the CDDB might be the information you provided. I'm just going to cancel this because this CD already does exist on the CDDB. So that's how you manually enter CD information into iTunes, and if you're feeling like a nice person afterwards, you can upload the info to save other people some time. Now before we move on to the next movie, I'm going to go back to Preferences and recheck Automatically Retrieve CD Track Names, because I always want iTunes to at least check for the CD info before I have to start typing it myself.